They lied, you cried. Karma smiled. Strange, isn't it, how the ones who swore loyalty were the first to twist the truth? How the hands you held were the first to let go when the room went dark? They wore sincerity like a costume, performed kindness like a role. But behind the curtain, it was all manipulation. And when the truth finally surfaced, it wasn't loud, it was silent. A silence that shattered more than any scream. You cried, not because you were weak, but because everything inside you was real, and that's exactly what made you dangerous in a world built on pretense. The mask they wore, they never approached you with open hands, only practiced expressions and calculated kindness. The truth is, they studied you, measured your honesty like a threat, not because you were naive, but because you were transparent in a world that thrives on illusion. They lied, and not just in words. They lied with their silences, their smiles, their timing. They lied with their "I care," and their "I'll never hurt you." But you see, deception doesn't always sound like betrayal. Sometimes it sounds like laughter that's too loud, compliments that feel too sweet, promises that arrive too fast. They wore masks, and not the kind you see in theatre, but the kind stitched from fear, jealousy, and the inability to face their own reflection. They wanted to be seen as good without doing good. And you were the mirror. That's why they turned on you. You made them uncomfortable without even trying, not because you exposed their lies, but because your truth revealed their emptiness. You didn't ask for perfection, only honesty. You didn't need grandeur, just consistency. But that was too expensive for them. They couldn't afford the cost of real connection. So instead, they offered you a performance polished, pleasing, persuasive. And you, being the soul you are, gave them the benefit of the doubt, again and again and again, until doubt became the only language left between you. What they never realized is that masks eventually slip. Lies decay in the presence of time. A truth delayed is still a truth owed. And no matter how far they run, the lie follows them not because you chased them, but because the lie was never about you. It was about them, their need to be in control, their fear of being truly seen, their addiction to admiration, even if it meant selling false promises in exchange for real hearts. They thought wearing a mask made them powerful. But you know better now. It made them hollow. You see, it takes strength to stand naked in your truth. It takes courage to say, "This is who I am," without the camouflage of charm or manipulation. But they didn't have that courage. So they crafted a version of themselves you could fall for, one that looked like safety, but was only strategy. And perhaps the saddest part is, they'll do it again to someone else in another story, with new lines, a fresh smile, and the same old mask. But that's no longer your concern. You've seen the truth. You've seen behind the curtain, and now you don't chase masks. You don't beg for honesty. You don't sit at tables where trust must be earned twice. They lied, yes, but you saw what they couldn't hide forever, and that means you're already 3 steps ahead. Not bitter, just awake. Not vengeful, just wiser. Because once you recognize the mask, you never fear it again. The pain you carried in silence, no one really saw it, did they? The weight you dragged behind your smile, the invisible bruises, the sleepless nights, the overthinking, the second guessing, the mental conversations with people who never deserved that much space in your mind. You didn't scream, you didn't beg, you didn't expose them. Instead, you chose silence not out of weakness, but because you were raised with dignity. Because somewhere deep down you believed that even when people fail you, you must never fail your own character. So you cried not in front of them, never loud enough to shake their illusion of innocence, but in the quiet corners of your soul, where no one claps for your survival, and no one sees the war behind your calm. You see, people think pain is always dramatic, that it announces itself with shattered glass or broken voices. But real pain is subtle, it whispers, it hides behind daily routines, it sits with you at breakfast. It walks next to you on lonely evenings, and the world, so caught up in its noise, rarely notices. But that's where your power was born, in that sacred silence, in those moments when you wanted to break, but chose to breathe, when you wanted to scream, but chose to grow. They thought they got away with it. They believed their lies erased your truth, that your quietness meant they'd won. But what they didn't understand is this silence is not surrender. Sometimes it's strategy, sometimes it's healing, sometimes it's a decision to no longer waste energy explaining your worth to those committed to misunderstanding it. Yes, you cried, but those tears were not weakness. They were release. They were proof that your soul still functions in a world that rewards numbness. And it's not easy to feel deeply in a time when shallowness is trendy. But you did. And that's your gift, not your burden. You carried the pain so well, they thought you had none. But that's what strength often looks like: quiet, composed, unnoticed. You didn't retaliate. You didn't expose their secrets or parade their betrayal. You didn't call their name when karma came knocking. Why? Because you were too focused on rebuilding yourself, too invested in your healing to attend the funeral of something that already died the day they chose dishonesty. The world may not have seen the nights you stayed up wrestling your own thoughts, but the universe took note. Life has a way of circling back, and not to punish, but to balance. And in that balance, your silence became your statement. Your pain became your proof. You rose from something that was meant to break you. And you did it with grace, not vengeance, with poise, not pity. You suffered, yes, but you didn't stay there. And that's why your story holds power. Not because you were spared from pain, but because you survived it. Silently, the mirror of consequences, you didn't lift a finger against them. You didn't need to, because the truth is, life has its own memory, its own rhythm, its own way of restoring what was broken and returning what was sent out. And for those who lied, manipulated, and used your kindness like it was a weakness, that day eventually comes, the day they meet themselves. Not the version they show the world, but the real one, the one they've been running from, hiding behind charm, excuses, and blame. That's the mirror of consequences, and no one escapes it forever. You see, there's a quiet law written into the fabric of existence. Not one made by courts or controlled by men. It's older than justice systems and more precise than revenge. It's the law that what you send into the world, whether truth or lies, loyalty or betrayal, will one day return. And not always through thunder or tragedy. Sometimes it returns subtly, through a friend who does to them what they once did to you, through a moment when they desperately need the honesty they once mocked, through nights they can't sleep, haunted not by guilt but by emptiness, because that's what lies leave behind, a hollowness that charm cannot fill and excuses cannot silence. And here's what they never expected, that you wouldn't chase them. You didn't become bitter, you didn't start a campaign to expose them, you simply let go, and that unnerved them more than any confrontation ever could, because they counted on your reaction. They wanted you to spiral. They expected you to become the villain in their story so they could stay the victim in their own, but you disappointed them, with grace. Now they live with what they created, not because you cursed them, but because they cursed themselves the moment they chose dishonesty over decency. And the world they built on lies, it starts to tremble, slowly, silently, but inevitably. That's not your doing, it's the echo of their own decisions. Every manipulation, every false promise, every selfish move, it's all still out there, circling, waiting for the right moment to return. And it does, because the universe listens, it balances, not when we demand it, but when we no longer need it. That's the real justice, when you're no longer driven by revenge, but they're no longer shielded from truth. When you've moved on, and they've just begun to understand what they lost, not just you, but the peace they never valued, the love they never earned, and the loyalty they'll struggle to find again. You were their mirror, and they broke it, but now they're left facing one they can't escape, the one that reflects not what you showed them, but who they really are, and that's karma, not fire, not fury, but a quiet mirror, one that never lies. The strength you didn't know you had. You didn't feel strong while it was happening. Let's be honest. You felt broken, confused, betrayed, like the ground beneath your feet had vanished, and no one noticed you were falling. You doubted yourself, replayed every moment, asked the same haunting questions over and over again. Was it me? Did I miss the signs? Was I too much or not enough? But buried beneath that storm of self, doubt was a quiet force, a strength you hadn't met yet. It didn't arrive like a savior. It didn't speak in loud, heroic tones. No, it whispered, it stayed, it watched, it waited, until the moment you needed it most. It was there the night you almost broke but didn't. The morning you got out of bed with a shattered heart and still showed up for life. The moment you decided to stop explaining your pain to people who only wanted your silence. That was strength, not the kind they show in movies, but the kind that's real, raw, unseen, the kind that's born not in comfort, but in chaos, not in applause, but in abandonment. They thought they broke you. That's the part they'll never admit, how sure they were that you'd fade, collapse, vanish quietly. They mistook your kindness for fragility. They saw your tears and thought you were weak. But that's because they've never been tested the way you have. They've never had to rebuild themselves from ruins they didn't create. You did, and not once but again and again, like a phoenix without witnesses. And every time you rose, you carried more wisdom, more clarity, more self-respect than before. You discovered something they never had: depth. The kind that comes only through struggle. You learned to sit with pain without letting it harden you. You learned to protect your peace without becoming cold. You learned that walking away doesn't mean defeat, it means knowing your value. That was the shift, when you stopped proving yourself and started preserving yourself, when you stopped waiting for them to understand and began trusting your own understanding. And now, look at you. Quieter, perhaps, more selective, but stronger, wiser, calmer. You know now that survival isn't just about breathing, it's about choosing who gets close, who gets your time, and who no longer gets access to your energy. That's a strength you didn't have before, not because you were weak, but because you hadn't yet been betrayed deeply enough to awaken it. You don't need to announce this version of you. The world will feel it. The ones who underestimated you will sense it. They'll look at you and see someone they don't quite recognize because you've outgrown the role they once assigned to you. You are not who you were. You are becoming who you were always meant to be. And it took the breaking to reveal the unbreakable in you, the smile that changed everything. It wasn't a loud victory. It wasn't celebrated with fireworks or applause. It was subtle, quiet. A single moment, maybe in the mirror, maybe in the middle of a simple day when you caught yourself smiling. Not because you forgot the pain, but because it no longer controlled you. That was the shift. That was the moment everything changed. It wasn't about revenge. It wasn't about proving them wrong. It was about reclaiming yourself. Your smile didn't return because life suddenly became perfect. It returned because you did. Because despite everything, the lies, the silence, the weight of betrayal, you made it through. And that smile, that was Karma's way of telling you, you did the right thing by being the right person, even when the wrong people didn't see it. There's something powerful about a smile born from healing. It doesn't shout. It doesn't need to. It carries within it the echoes of every tear that fell in silence, every night spent questioning your worth, every day you showed up even when you felt invisible. That smile says, I've seen the darkness, and I chose not to stay there. It's the kind of smile that unnerves the ones who tried to break you because they can't figure out how you survived without their apology, how you grew without their support, how you glowed without their validation. But that's the beauty of real strength. It builds itself in silence and announces itself in peace. They might never admit it, but they notice. Oh, they notice the calm in your voice, the clarity in your eyes, the quiet joy that now walks beside you. They see it, and for a moment they remember what they lost. And that's not your revenge, that's just the truth unfolding. While they recycled the same old patterns, you evolved. You chose healing over hiding, growth over grudges, grace over games, and now you smile not to impress them, not to invite them back, but because you no longer carry the weight of what they did. Karma didn't roar, it didn't come crashing in with drama and spectacle. It simply smiled with you because justice, real justice, is found in peace, in knowing you never lowered yourself, in knowing you remained honest in the face of deceit, in knowing you walked through fire and didn't come out bitter, just brighter. So smile not because it all went right, but because you made it right within yourself, because the lessons have settled, the storm has passed, and you are no longer waiting for closure. You became it. You are no longer waiting for them to see your value. You see it now. That's the smile that changed everything. That's the smile they can't forget. And that's the smile that tells the world, they lied. I cried. Karma smiled, and I rose